Alrighty, well, hello everyone. Thank you for being here today for our final student organization Zoom series. Today we are focusing on assessing organizational culture and really understanding what is organizational culture, what does that look like within a student organization, and how do we assess it? So again, thank you for being here. Excited to go ahead and get started. So let's see. All right, so we can go ahead and start with some introductions. My name is Celeste Dawson. I use she, her pronouns. I currently am the graduate assistant for student engagement in the Office of Engagement, Leadership, and Service. Excuse me. I work alongside Jackie here. And I also am a current second year student in the College Student Affairs Administration Master's Program. So that's a little bit about me. Again, excited to be here and chat with you all. So, all right, so just to go into some content overview to share out what we're going to be chatting about today. The first thing is, what is organization culture and how do we define that? Then we're going to look into the 3 specific levels of organizational culture. And then finally, we're going to chat about how do you assess your own organizational culture. So I wanted to start off with opening it up with a question out to you all. So if you wanted to share in the chat or unmute yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with, but really starting off the conversation with this question of how do you define culture? What specifically does this look like within an organization? Overall, what thoughts do you have in defining culture? And so I'll give you a few minutes to think about that, share some ideas out in the chat if you would like, or unmute yourself. Yeah, and we'll go from there.
Hi, sorry, I had to take myself off video for a second. And when I think about culture within a student organization, very similar to what Nelson said, I think a lot of it has to do with your values, and also having a common goal is oftentimes, or a common interest is oftentimes what really defines a culture. And I mean, just when I think about culture and it being a group of people, there's something about like a community sense, because you all have, like I said, like that common goal, common value. So a lot of community is what I think of too with culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll touch on some of the things that were shared in the chat as well. So we have that values play a large role in culture, and someone also shared that culture is that attitude within the organization applied towards the shared goal or in general interactions and relationships. So very much so, you all said similar things, and I agree with that all. This shared notion, shared values, shared ideas, shared goals, very much so this sense of community. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that out. So when we look at the definition of organizational culture, we have this very long definition here, but I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we're going to break this down a little bit to really understand like what is organizational culture. So it is defined as the pattern of basic assumptions that a given group has either invented, discovered, or developed in learning to cope with its problems of external adaptation and internal integration, and that have worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. So I know that was a lot. You might be like, Celeste, what the heck did you just say to me? Don't worry, we're going to break it down a little bit more. So really thinking about, what does this mean? So Culture implies, firstly, that there's this pattern of basic assumptions. Similarly to what you all shared, there are these shared ideas that everybody within the organization feels and assumes about, about the organization, about the culture. Those assumptions have either been invented or discovered or developed. And so this really is thinking, about how long your organization has been, functioning. For those new organizations, you might be in the process of really developing these assumptions, whereas some older organizations may have already have them discovered. But overall, they've either been invented, discovered, or developed. And these assumptions have worked well enough to be considered valid. And so they're functioning well, shared ideas, and then those assumptions are then taught to the new members of your organization as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to problems that are at hand. So, like I said, if you're a brand new organization, you may be in the process of just now defining your culture. And if you're, an organization that has already been established, you may have had these ideas shared down and passed down to you, but overall, it is this shared notion of beliefs and ideas in relation to your org. So to break that down just a little bit further, culture also implies that there are group dynamics at play. So this may look differently depending on the structure of your organization. I know some organizations have a common structure of having a president and a vice president and then executive board members. Other organizations might not function in that same president, vice president structure. But either way, there are group dynamics that are at play between the members, between the officers of the organization, and overall just between the members of the organization. There are dynamics at play between those members. And so that initiates culture in and of itself. And then another thing is that there's, again, like I said, this notion of shared beliefs and ideas. So this can really be connected to your organization's mission specifically and what your why is and why this organization was functioned. And it also can imply that there's specific expectations of behavior. So what are the members of your organization expected to do? What does the time commitment look like? All of these different things come together to create this idea of shared culture within your organization. And so another way to break down organizational culture and what that looks like, there's 3 different levels that I want to focus on and touch on today. So the first level is artifacts. And typically when this is talked about, it's looked at as kind of like a tiered level. So artifacts being at the very top of understanding your organizational culture. Artifacts are considered the visible and audible symbols that make up your organization. So this is very, very broad and can encompass so many things, but it can be anything from the style of clothing that your members wear to what your physical meeting space looks like. It can encompass the ways in which the people within your organization speak, the volume at which they speak, different norms that are shared within your organization. So overall, just these like things that are visible, they can be seen, they can be heard, and they're symbols that represent who your organization is. So that's one level of organizational culture. The second level of organizational culture has to do with your values. And so I know this was mentioned earlier in the presentation. So really considering the values of your organization, what are your strategies that are at play? How do you go about your day-to-day work? What are the overarching goals of your organization? What philosophies have been in place? What are those guiding notions that really push your organization forward? And then what is the why behind your organization? Why was this organization created? What is the purpose of it? And, what does that look like overall? So that's the second level of organizational culture. And then the third level focuses on underlying assumptions. So these are those unconscious beliefs that guide your organization. That is exactly what I was chatting about earlier, in that sense of like shared ideas of everybody in your organization knows that this is how we as an organization function. And it's unconscious because when you think about it, like when you're a part of an organization, often we're not really thinking about the culture of that organization and how we interact, you know, in our day to day. We typically are a part of it, and, you know, the assumptions are shared down to us, and we, you know, just become a part of the culture and interact with it in that capacity. And so a lot of times these beliefs about your organization are unconscious until you really do start to consider and assess, you know, what and how, you know, in what ways and how is my organization culture functioning? So those are the three levels of organizational culture, and just another way to kind of really understand what that is. And so I want to talk about now, why is it important to consider what your organizational culture is? So one of the first reasons why I think it's important is because it can really help you understand if this organization is aligning with your personal values, as well as aligning with the values of the organization overall. Really considering, you know, is what I'm doing in this organization on the day to day aligning with who I am as a person and what I value in my everyday life? And overall, are the values of the organization that I considered, you know, when I first stepped into this organization, is that aligning with what we're actually doing in our day-to-day work? The second reason that it's important to assess it is because organization culture is passed on to your new members. And so in questioning, you know, and questioning just how is, you know, my organization functioning, you can really begin to consider, is this, you know, a culture that I feel proud of? Is this a culture that I want to continue to pass on to new members? And, you know, is the way that we're functioning doing well and something that I want us to continue doing? The last reason that I think it's important to assess what your organizational culture looks like is because it can give you insight into the future of your organization. So when you start to consider some of these why, and you some of the whys behind it, and you start to really assess it, if you find that it might not necessarily be functioning in the ways that you considered, that can be like the springboard into, you know, the future of your organization and what you actually want, you know, the culture to look like and to feel like. So now I want to chat about how you can assess your culture. And so these are just basic overview, you know, ideas of ways that you can start to assess what is your organizational culture like. So one of the first things that you can consider is, what is the purpose and the mission of your organization? And what are my organization members? What are we doing to meet that purpose on the day to day? So really looking at, why was this organization created, and is what we're doing every day aligning with that mission? And if not, what can we do to help push ourselves towards, you know, that alignment of what our mission and goals are of this organization? Another way that you can assess the culture of your organization is to consider, what does communication within the organization look like, and is it functioning well? Are expectations being met? Are our expectations being met, and our expectations being communicated out directly so organization members know, you know, what is expected of them? Is communication sporadic, or is it, you know, really consistent? So really understanding and questioning, like, what does communication look like? And is it working well? And if not, what can we do to maybe help align that? And then one of the last things that you can consider is this notion of time. So how much time is each person within your organization spending on the organization? And is it conducive to what you want to accomplish? And then additional tips that I have in terms of assessing your organization culture. One of the first things that you can do if you're really looking to get a feel for what your org culture looks like is checking in with the people that are a part of that culture. So looking to your organization members, looking, to them and asking, how do you feel about this organization? Is it functioning in the ways that you had hoped when you first joined this org? Do the members of your organization feel connected to the work that you're doing on a day-to-day? Is this a place and a space that they feel safe in? Do they feel that they can, share their ideas or ask questions? And really understanding, how your organizations overall feel about their culture of the organization. The second thing is to look at your organizational foundational documents. So these are things like your constitution, your meeting agendas, etc. Our expectations that are set in those meeting agendas and within the constitution, are they clear? Looking specifically at your constitution and understanding, like, are things up to date, and that is everything that's listed on here, aligning with where we're at currently. And if not, what can we do to change that and make it up to date, and make it so that it's aligning with where we want to be. And then the last tip that I have in terms of assessing your organizational culture is recognizing that change is okay. I think that sometimes change can be daunting, and assessing your culture and potentially realizing that it's not functioning in the ways that you were hoping, or there's aspects of it that, might need to be changed, can be nerve-wracking a little bit, maybe scary. But if you realize that your org isn't functioning in the ways that you hoped, it's 100% okay. Because when you really think about it, this is an opportunity for you to make the necessary changes within your organization for the betterment of your organization overall. And so that is the presentation that I have for you today. I did want to mention that there are so many resources available online for you to understand more about organizational culture and how to assess it. Like I said, this was a very large-scale overview of some of these topics, but if you did want more information, I would 100% encourage you to, do some research on your own and really see different ways that you can assess your organizational culture. So yeah, thank you for being here today and listening. I'm gonna open it up to questions now. If you wanna ask any questions, or if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat, or you can share out directly. And if not, you can also connect with Engagement Leadership and Service, and myself specifically, and our information is listed there. So again, thank you. And yeah, we'll check the chat for some potential questions. Okay, so one of the questions that we have is, if an organization is not meeting their goals, what tips do you have for moving forward? Good question, really good question. I would say, if you're not meeting your goals, what tips do you have for moving forward with that? I think, recognizing, one, that you're not meeting your goals is probably a good step. And then using that as an opportunity to open that up to your entire, group. So checking in with all of your members, and making that an opportunity to, get input from your organization members, asking them, what can we do to move ourselves forward, and really using that collaborative nature, I think, of the organization structure would be a good idea. I think having a brainstorming session to just put out there, what can we do to help meet our goals, and then also creating a schedule and a timeline for those goals that you want to meet. I think sometimes that can get overwhelming, but I think having a detailed outline of, all right, these are our goals that we want to meet, this is a timeline that we want to work towards to meet them, and then making sure that all of your members are on the same page with that timeline, to help push your members towards those goals that you have. That's a good question. Thank you. Other questions?
Mine isn't necessarily a question. Celeste, I thought you had really awesome information. The one thing that really stuck out to me that I wrote down because it just really stuck out to me that, you know, you can have ideas and you can say this is what we all think and this is our common goal, but really the point you made about the like communication and execution of it and how important that is for it to really be a culture. It's not it like ideas have to be put into action for a period of time, like you said. So that was something that I found really interesting, that like how important that communication and execution piece is for it to even be considered the culture of your organization, because just thinking that and saying that's what you're doing isn't really enough. So that was really eye-opening for me, and I really appreciate this presentation today. It was really, really informative.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you had that takeaway. And yeah, I agree fully. Like, it's one thing to have communication and say, like, these are the ways that we're communicating, but, you know, it's another to actually put that into action and to ensure that all of your members are on the same page with that communication. So I'm glad that that was your takeaway. And I hope that's helpful for, you know, execution, hopefully within your own organization. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Alrighty. Well, like I said, if you do have any other questions, feel free to connect with ELS or with me specifically. Our information is there. But thank you again for being here today. And yeah, good luck with the rest of your semester.